So
it
are
looked
you
more doggish before?
are you trying? What are you doing now? You're still trying to draw a hound.
I look like a shield.
I know.
Oh.
This is the third attempt of drawing a dog, well, a hound. We've now resorted to looking at illustrations to try and give us. Oh, do you have like instructions?
Well, I guess. They're not really telling, they're just.
Oh, I like the little bee feet. Those are cute. Good job.
Something's-
No, it's sweet.
Careful, it might kill you.
Carefully, it might kill you.
The hound is to be believed.
Yeah. So hi everyone. I couldn't resist. Oh, that's super cute though.
Fearsome hound.
The fearsome hound of the Baskervilles. So my name is Courtney. I'm one of the teen librarians here. This is Rachel, also one of the teen librarians here, and doing.
Librarian, that's for sure.
You know, like there's other librarians here who are the creative studio people.
Yes.
We're not them. And in the chat is our mod, who is Matt, who's over there. So you may hear snarky commentary coming from the ether, or from the tippy tappies, from the tippy tappies. But we'll be hearing from Matt later. Okay. We are going to do the finale of The Hound of the Baskervilles. We have been reading this for quite some time, and I am determined that we finish this out. We learned a lot last week, and we also found that doing a character web was super helpful. So I have notes. Are we ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Starts off, Sir Charles Baskerville eats it. Starts the story, man has died. Mysteriously, we don't know what happened, but we are told by Dr. Mortimer, who is both a family friend, a doctor, and also somebody who loves, what is it, phrenology? It's like the science and study of the shape of skulls. He gets real excited about it. It's a little bit weird, I'm not gonna lie. So Dr. Mortimer tells us that the Baskerville family has this supernatural curse, where they are to be hunted. Anybody who lives at Baskerville Hall, their particular estate, will be hunted and killed by the Hound of the Baskervilles. Pseudoscience indeed. So this has been brought about because of long ago an ancestor of Sir Charles. His name was Sir Hugo, and we now know that that is actually important. We'll get to that in a moment. Sir Hugo was the super bad man who did horrible things to this woman that he liked. He basically kidnapped her and held her hostage, and when she ran away and escaped, he hunted her down. And then in the process of hunting her down, he got hunted down. So, hey. But since then, the whole family has always had a curse. So it seems. Anyway, Sir Charles has died. Mortimer's he's talking to Sherlock Holmes and Watson, who are our main characters. Sherlock is the famous detective. Watson is his famous biographer, sidekick, friend, power couple. You know, there's enough fan theories about everything, so let's be honest. Anyway,
What's Watson's first name?
John?
Interesting.
Yeah, convenient, right? Not very complicated. So Mortimer goes to Sherlock and he's like, hey, I actually don't care about solving the murder or death of my friend because maybe it was a supernatural puppy. I'm actually a lot more concerned about Sir Henry Baskerville, who is his nephew, who is coming to inherit the estate. And we've already had warning letters, and we're being followed, and we need this guy not to die because we need him to put money into the community. Reasonable things, totally motives. Anyway, Sherlock Holmes is like, no problem, we will help you with this, except I am way too busy and I need to be in London and I'm not going to go. But I'll send my buddy John Watson down with you. So John, make sure, no matter what, you never leave Sir Henry's side. And John's like, rightio. And then immediately when they get there, leaves his side and goes for a walkies. In the process, he meets several of the neighbors, one being Stapleton, who I found out his first name is Jack. Yes. We mostly work in last names in this book. So Jack Stapleton, who is a naturalist and just really eager dude, who has a sister who shall not be named. She is Miss Stapleton. Maybe one day we'll find out if she has a name. We'll see. Probably Mary. Yeah, so there is a reason why sister is in quotations, is because later on, after much deducting and investigating, we find out that, so Miss Stapleton and Sir Henry were crushing on each other and kind of dating, but like Jack Stapleton was like super like possessive and jealousy, and it was super weird. We have recently found out that his sister is not actually his sister, it is actually his wife. And he made her pretend to be his sister so that she could manipulate Sir Henry, and so that Jack can also manipulate Sir Henry. Now, why would he do this? Well, we have also recently found out. Hi, Hitchy. I'm glad you're here. So we have recently found out that, so the sister is the wife, and we have also recently found out that Jack Stapleton probably very strongly is actually distantly related to Sir Henry. Matt did not know this. He's over there shaking the heads. So, Sir Charles, to kind of explain, Sir Charles had a brother who is, hi, glad to see that you're here too. So Sir Charles had a brother who I found out is Roger, Sir Roger. And it was explained at the beginning of the book that Roger had moved to South America and presumably died there. So the interesting thing is, who is Jack Stapleton, and why does he look to be the spitting image of Sir Hugo, the ancestor from long time ago? Big bad Hugo. So Sherlock kind of put those things together. Sherlock did eventually show up down there. Turns out he was there the whole time, hanging out in the countryside in the moors and living like, just not living well. He was just living out in the wilds. So just again, the little hearts next to okay.
Except they're kind of broken hearts because he sent Watson by himself.
Oh, that is true. We are mad at Sherlock for how he did John Watson dirty. Team Watson. I know you're typing it. Like, Team Watson. Okay, other characters of import is the Barrymores. So there is John Barrymore. We now learned his name. This is the butler, and then his wife, Mrs. Barrymore. I found out her name. It's Eliza. She has a name. So hooray. So the Barrymores were originally being really suspicious. They were doing some weird activity at night, like sneaking around, and she was like crying, and her husband, John Barrymore, was like, no one's crying. And then she's like, yes, I was crying. We're like, why did you lie? So we find out that the reason for all of their weirdness is that there is an escaped convict who turns out to be Eliza Barrymore's brother. His name is Selden.
Not Sheldon.
No, it's Seldon. There's this whole hullabaloo. It's very silly. Go back and watch the last videos about the whole thing. Selden has now died. There was a whole mistake about that one, but he has now died. And Mrs. Barrymore is very sad, which is fair because that is her brother, even though he was a convicted murderer. Other important characters are Mrs. Laura Lyons. So she is connected in all these different ways, and this is very recent information. So Mrs. Laura Lyons had contacted Sir Charles to ask him for help with something and asked him to go out to his gate on his property late at night, and then she didn't show up. But that was also where he died. So he apparently saw something horrifying and basically his heart gave out and he was terrified to death. But like, why did she write that letter and why didn't she show up? Turns out that she is connected with John Stapleton, who has been promising her that he is not actually married to the woman that he's calling his sister, that he is single, and that she needs to divorce her husband so that they can be together. So he's been manipulating her. And she's like, I knew he was doing suspicious stuff, but I was being loyal to him because he was being loyal to me. And this all came ahead when she found out that, like, he's already married and he's been manipulating her. And she's just like, murder, like she's done with this guy. Her father is Mr. Franklin, who frankly is the funniest dude on this entire book because he's just like the most petty old man who just goes out of his way to like, he's like the Karen's Karen, like he's land. Yeah, land. Yeah, he's very funny. That whole section was a delight to read. That man just delights in everyone's just agony. And then lastly is Lestrade, who wasn't really given a lot of introduction. There you go. He wasn't given a lot of introduction because he's a reoccurring character in like all Sherlock Holmes stories. He is a detective out of like the London police force and everything too. So he just showed up. And that's kind of where we're at. Okay, so where we are in the story is all of this information has come ahead. However, so only John and Sherlock know about it.
Sherlock was there the whole time.
He was there the whole time. Sir Henry, they are keeping him very much in the dark because they are using him as bait to trap the Stapletons. Currently, Sir Henry has been told this entire time, do not walk alone in the moors at night. You will die from demonic puppy. Or maybe some other reason. Who knows? So Sherlock is like, hey, you're going to go over to the Stapletons for dinner tomorrow, right? Cool. Make sure that when you go, you're going to go in your carriage thing. Send your carriage back home and tell them that you're going to walk home afterwards. And you're going to walk home alone. And Henry is like, but you'll be there too? And Sherlock and Watson are like, nah, we're going back to London. You'll be fine. But it's very much a front. So
make sure you tell Stapleton.
Yeah.
We're nowhere to be found.
That's right. So Sir Henry is very much under the impression that he is 100% alone right now. That he is following instructions to walk back to his house alone tonight, and it's pretty unnervy. He's already heard like the baying of the hound and like all this other stuff and like all these things. So man be nervous, and he definitely thinks that he's in some danger, even though Sherlock has told him, no, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. But just as like any time where we kind of feel like we're in a very bad situation and somebody's like, you're fine, you still have the nervies. So, all right, shall we get to it? I think we're good to go. You're gonna keep up on the any revelations of character design? Yeah. Okay, we are on chapter 14, adequately titled The Hound of the Baskervilles. And here we go. One of Sherlock Holmes' defects, again, this is also like written from the perspective of John Watson. Oftentimes he's like chronicling or writing a biography about Sherlock Holmes. So we get like his point of view on all this. Also, there's a lot of like conversation without it telling me who's talking. So I do my best. Mm-hmm. All right, so this is just John Watson kind of writing to you. One of Sherlock Holmes's defects, if indeed one may call it a defect, was that he was exceedingly loath to communicate his full plan to any other person until the instant of their fulfillment. Mm-hmm. Partly it came, no doubt, from his own masterful nature, which loved to dominate and surprise those who were around him. Partly also from his professional caution, which urged him never to take any chances. The result, however, was very trying for those who were acting as his agents and assistants. I had often suffered under it, but never more so than during that long drive in the darkness. The great ordeal was in front of us. At last we were about to make our final effort, and Holmes had said nothing, and I could only surmise what his course of action would be. My nerves thrilled with anticipation when at last the cold wind upon our faces and the dark void spaces on either side of the narrow road told me that we were back upon the moor again. Every stride of the horses and every turn of the wheels was taking us nearer to our supreme adventure. Our conversation was hampered by the presence of the driver of the hired wagonette, so that we were forced to talk of the trivial matters when our nerves were tense with emotion and anticipation. It was a relief to me, after that unnatural restraint, when we had at last passed Franklin's house and knew that we were drawing near to the hall, to the scene of action. We did not drive up to the door, but got down near the gate of the avenue. The wagonette was paid off and ordered to return to Combe Tracy forthwith, while we started to walk to Merripit House, which is where the Stapletons are. That's where they live. "Are you armed, Lestrade?" The little detective smiled. "As long as I have my trousers, I have a hip pocket, and as long as I have my hip pocket, I have something in it." "Good! My friend and I are also ready for emergencies, so everyone's got a gun." "You're mighty close about this affair, Mr. Holmes. What's the game now?" "A waiting game." "My word, it does not seem a very cheerful place," said the detective. This is Lestrade, by the way. Said the detective with a shiver, glancing round him at the gloomy slopes of the hill and the huge lake of fog which lay over the Grimpen Mire. "I see the lights of a house ahead of us." "That is Merripit House, and the end of our journey. I must request you walk on tiptoe and not talk above a whisper." We moved cautiously along the track as if we were bound for the house, but Holmes halted us when we were about 200 yards from it. "This will do," said he. "These rocks upon the right make an admirable screen." "We are here to wait?" "Yes, we shall make our little ambush here. Get into this hollow, Lestrade. You have been inside the house, have you not, Watson? Can you tell us the position of the rooms? Are those latticed windows at the end?" "I think they are kitchen windows." "And the one beyond, which shines so very brightly?" "Well, that is certainly the dining room." The blinds are up. You know the lie of the land best. Creep forward quietly and see what they are doing. But for heaven's sake, don't let them know that you are watching." I tiptoed down the path and stooped behind the low wall which surrounded the stunted orchard. Creeping in its shadow, I reached a point where I could look straight through the uncurtained window. There were only 2 men in the room, and Sir Henry and Stapleton. They sat with their profiles towards me on their other side of the round table. Both of them were smoking cigars, and coffee and wine were in front of them. Stapleton was talking with animation, but the baronet looked pale and distant. Perhaps the thought of that lonely walk across the ill-omened moor was weighing heavily upon his mind. As I watched them, Stapleton rose and left the room, while Sir Henry filled his glass again and leaned back in the chair, puffing at his cigar. I heard the creak of the door again, and the crisp sound of boots upon the gravel. The steps passed along the path on the other side of the wall under which I crouched. Looking over, I saw the naturalist pause at the door of an outhouse in the corner of the orchard. So he left him there, and now he's outside. A key turned in a lock, and as he passed in there was a curious scuffling sound from within. He was only a minute or so inside, and when I turned the key once, and then I heard the key turn once more, and he passed me and re-entered the house. I saw him rejoin his guest, and I crept quietly back to where my companions were waiting to tell them what I had seen. "You say, Watson, that the lady was not there?" Holmes asked when I had finished my report. No. Where can she be then? Since there is no light in any other room except for the kitchen, I cannot think where she is. I have said that over the great Grimpen Mire there hung a dense white fog. It was drifting slowly in our direction and banked itself up like a wall on the side of the shimmering ice field. Sorry, skipped a line. Like a wall on the side of us, low but thick and well-defined. The moon shone on it, and it looked like a great shimmering ice field, with the heads of the distant tors as rocks borne up into its surface. Holmes's face was turned towards it, and he muttered impatiently as we watched its sluggish drift. It's moving towards us, Watson. Is that serious? Very serious indeed. The one thing upon earth which could have disarranged my plans. He can't be very long now. It's already 10 o'clock. Our success and even his life may depend upon his coming out before the fog is over the path. That's scary. So, the night was clear and fine above us. The stars shone cold and bright, while a half moon bathed the whole scene in a soft, uncertain light. Before us lay the dark bulk of the house, its serrated roof and bristling chimneys with hard outlined against the silver-spangled sky. Broad bars of golden light from the lower windows stretched across the orchard and the moor. One of them was suddenly shut off. The servants had left the kitchen. There only remained the lamp in the dining room, where the two men, the murderous host and the unconscious guest, as in like unaware guest in this case, still chatted over cigars. Yeah, because unconscious guest now means something a little bit different. Yeah. You don't have someone who's going to be doing anything for a bit there. You drank too much, my good sir. All right, every minute, while white woolly plain, which covered one half of the moor, was drifting ever closer and closer to the house. Already the first thin wisps of it were curling across the golden square to the lighted window. The farther wall of the orchard was already invisible, and the trees were standing out in the swirl of white vapor. As we watched it, the fog wreaths came crawling round both corners of the house and rolled slowly into one dense bank upon which the upper floor and the roof floated like a strange ship upon the shadowy sea. Holmes struck his hand passionately upon the rock in front of us and stamped his feet in his impatience. If he isn't out in a quarter of an hour, the path will be covered. In half an hour, we won't be able to see our hands in front of us. Shall we move further back upon high ground? Yes, I think that we will. The way that he describes, like, this fog is like it's a whole new enemy.
Yeah.
like it's impending doom.
Like, I'm waiting to find out that the Stapletons have a fog machine.
They're ravers.
Yeah.
Like, that would explain so much. All right, so as the fog bank flowed onward, we fell back before it until we were half a mile from the house. And still that dense white sea, the moon slivering its upper edge, swept slowly and inexorably on. We're going too far, said Holmes. We dare not take the chance of his being overtaken before he can reach us. At all costs, we must hold our ground where we are. He dropped to his knees and clapped his ear to the ground. Oh, thank God, I think I hear him coming. A sound of, so he's like, tracking, I guess. I don't.
Calm down.
Yeah, like.
You don't hear him.
I would like to know if that works. Does anybody know if that works?
I mean, maybe like a horse.
Maybe?
Maybe you could feel the vibrations, but like a man walking.
Aw, man. Who knows?
Like a single man.
Huh, possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we are going too far, blah, blah, blah. A sound of quick steps broke the silence of the moor. Crouching among the stones, we stared intently at the silver-tipped bank in front of us. The steps grew louder, and through the fog, as through a curtain, there stepped the man who we were waiting. He looked around him in surprise as he emerged into the clear, starlit night. Then he came swiftly along the path, passed close to where we lay, and went up onto the long slope behind us. As he walked, he glanced continuously over either shoulder like a man who is ill at ease. "Hist!" cried Holmes, and I heard the sharp click of a cocking pistol. "Look out, it's coming!" There was a thin, crisp, continuous patter from somewhere in the heart of the crawling bank. The cloud was within 50 yards of where we lay, and we glared at it, all three, uncertain what horror was about to break from the heart of it. I was at Holmes's elbow, and I glanced for an instant at his face. It was pale and exultant, his eyes shining brightly in the moonlight. But suddenly, they started forward in a rigid, fixed stare, and his lips parted in amazement. At the same instant, Lestrade gave a yell of terror and threw himself face down upon the ground. I sprang to my feet, my inert hand gripping my pistol, my mind paralyzed by the dreadful shape which had sprung out upon us from the shadows of the fog. A hound it was, an enormous, coal-black hound, so not a chihuahua, or a beagle, or a spaniel, or whatever other breed of dog we had fixed upon. Unless it's like an overgrown chihuahua, I'm just saying. A hound it was, an enormous, coal-black hound, but not such a hound as mortal eyes had ever seen. Fire burst from its open mouth. Its eyes glowed with a smoldering glare, and its muzzle and hackles and dewlip were outlined in a flickering flame. Never in the delirious dream of a disordered brain could anything more savage, more appalling, more hellish be conceived than the dark form and savage face which broke upon us out of the wall of fog. Oh, very nice rendition.
Ooh, the fire.
You got some fire breath there. Doggo's had some Takis. Or maybe he's eating Takis, it's hard to tell. With long bounds, the huge black creature was leaping down the track, following hard upon the footsteps of our friend. So paralyzed were we by the apparition that we allowed him to pass before us before we recovered our nerve. Then, Holmes and I both fired together, and the creature gave a hideous howl, which showed that one at least had hit him. He did not pause, however, but bounded onward, far away on the path as we saw Sir Henry looking back, his face white in the moonlight, his hands raised in horror, glaring helplessly at the frightful thing which was hunting him down. But that cry of pain from the hound had blown all of our fears to the wind. If he was vulnerable, he was mortal. And if we could wound him, we could kill him. Never have I seen a man run as Holmes ran that night. Not even Selden, the convict, who outpaced you like an Olympic runner earlier, But hey, good job, Holmes. I am reckoned fleet of foot, but he outpaced me as much as I outpaced the little professional. In front of us, as we flew up the track, we heard scream after scream from Sir Henry and the deep roar of the hound. I was in time to see the beast spring upon its victim, hurl him to the ground, and worry at his throat, so biting at his throat. But the next instant, Holmes had emptied 5 barrels of his revolver into the creature's flank. With the last howl of agony and a vicious snap in the air, it rolled upon its back, 4 feet pawing furiously, and then fell limp upon its side. I know.
What if he was just like, my buddy Sir Henry?
I don't know.
He was just looking up.
Oh, poor little hell puppy. You don't deserve this. I stooped, panting, and pressed my pistol to the dreadful shimmering head. It was useless to press the trigger. The great hound was dead. Sir Henry lay insensible where he had fallen. We tore away his collar, and Holmes breathed a prayer of gratitude that we saw that there was no sign of a wound, and that the rescue had been in time. Already our friend's eyelids shivered, and he made a feeble effort to move. Lestrade thrust his brandy flask between the baronet's teeth, and the 2 frightened eyes were looking up at us. So he's
Take a
drink. Take a drink. Just dunk, get some stout heartiness into you, my good sir. So this is Sir Henry. My God, he whispered. What was it? What in heaven's name was it? It's dead, whatever it is, said Holmes. We've laid the family ghost to rest once and for all. In mere size and strength, it was a terrible creature, which was laying stretched before us. It was not a pure bloodhound, and it was not a pure mastiff, but it appeared to be a combination of the two. Gaunt, savage, and large as a small lioness. Even now, in the stillness of death, the huge jaws seemed to be dripping with a bluish flame, and the small, deep-set, cruel eyes were ringed with fire. I placed my hand upon the glowing muzzle, and as I held them up, my own fingers smoldered and gleamed in the darkness. Phosphorus, I said. A cunning preparation of it, said Holmes, sniffing at the dead animal. There is no smell which might have interfered with his powerful scent. We owe you a deep apology, Sir Henry, for exposing you to this fright. I was prepared for a hound, but not for such a creature as this, and the fog gave us little time to receive him. Well, you have saved my life. First endangered it, though. Are you strong enough to stand? Give me another mouthful of that brandy, and I shall be ready for anything. So, now, if you will help me up, what do you propose to do? Well, to leave you here.
Okay.
It's not what I would want to hear at that moment. That would be the last thing I would want to hear at that exact moment. That sounds like a bad plan.
It's like a theme of the book. You just do whatever you're not supposed to be doing.
And Holmes will tell you later why you did it.
Yeah.
I can explain it to you right now. Phosphorus, I'm on the Wikipedia,
Oh, yeah.
emits a faint glow when exposed to oxygen. White phosphorus. So I don't know how you would obtain it. Like, where are you getting it from? I don't know. Pharmacy.
The pharmacy. The phosphorus
the old-time
pharmacy.
English pharmacy.
Yeah, maybe it's at the corner store. All right, so it does glow, and I know that it glows like a bluey white.
Yeah.
And Sherlock said that it doesn't really have a smell to it, so it wouldn't interfere with the hound's ability to track Sir Henry by smell. So it would look horrific. But I also can't imagine that
You
that's
have to,
actually
like,
healthy for that
You
dog.
have to straight up mine phosphate rock
Right,
to get it.
yeah. And if it starts like reacting just to oxygen, like
Yeah. Well,
but that poor dog had like phosphorus shoved into its mouth and around its eyes. Like,
yeah.
it's not the puppy's fault. There's no bad dogs, just bad owners. And this guy's like one of the worst.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to leave you here.
Yeah.
You are not fit for further adventures tonight. If you will wait, one or the other of us will go back with you to the hall. He tried to stagger to his feet, but he was still ghastly pale and trembling in every limb. Fair. We helped him to a rock, where he sat shivering with his face buried in his hands. At least give the man a blanket for shock.
He's also been drinking
He has
and
been
smoking,
drinking
like,
and smoking.
and then they just gave him like 2 shots.
Yeah, like
He's
been...
probably like,
The man is
What's
developing
happening?
PTSD as we speak. Like, give him a blanket. Like, or like your jacket, something. Give the man a hug. Anyway. Poor Sir Henry.
yeah. And how old is Sir Henry? I'm picturing him like 20s, like a young kid.
It feels like that. I think it did like say at the beginning of it, but yeah, details. Matt, are you on it? I saw the head
Yeah.
nod of like, this is my mission.
Figure out how old. 'Cause
All
it
right.
feels like he's just a kid. He's like, what?
I know, like he was living in America like a month and a half ago, you know, like
Yeah.
poor guy. Okay, so they left him there. And Holmes says, we must leave you now. The rest of our work must be done, and every moment is of importance. We have our case, and now we only want our man. It's 1,000 to 1 against our finding him at the house, he continued, as we retraced our steps swiftly down the path. Those shots must have told him that the game was up. We were some distance off, and this fog may have deadened them. One of them is speaking. I can't tell which. So one of them said that. And then Holmes says again, he followed the hound to call him off. And he goes, so Holmes says, well, he followed the hound to call him off, of that you can be certain. No, he's gone by this time, but we'll search the house and make sure. The front door was open, so we rushed in and hurried from room to room in the amazement of the doddering old manservant who met us at the passage. There was no light save for the dining room, but Holmes caught up the lamp and left no corner of the house unexplored. No sign could we see of the man who we were chasing, and up on the upper floor, however, one of the bedroom doors was locked. "Someone's in there!" cried Lestrade. "I can hear a movement. Open this door!" A faint moaning and rustling came from within. Holmes struck the door just over the lock with the flat of his foot and flew open. Man drop kicked the door.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he did. That's awesome.
I'm picturing Robert Downey Jr. doing this.
As you should. It's so much more fun that way. Or Benedict Cumberbatch, honestly. Like either one. Both highly entertaining. Yeah, he's 30.
He's 30.
He's around our age then. Yeah.
I feel like he's acting much younger.
I mean,
30 and he's not married?
well, see, he tried.
In this time?
He tried. He
but-
tried. Unfortunately, his taste is married women. All right. So I lost where I was. All right. So he drops, kicks the door.
But in his defense, he didn't know she was married.
Yeah.
I feel like she wasn't doing a great job of hiding it though.
Uh-huh.
She was always a little awkward.
Yeah. All right, so he kicks the door open. Pistol in hand, all three of us rushed into the room. But there was no sign within it of that desperate and defiant villain whom we had expected to see. Instead, we were faced by an object so strange and so unexpected that we stood for a moment staring at it in amazement. The room had been fashioned into a small museum, and the walls were lined by a number of glass-topped cases full of that collection of butterflies and moths, and the formation of which had been the relaxation of this complex and dangerous man. In the center of the room, there was an upright beam, which had been placed at some period as a support for the old worm-eaten bulk of the timber which spanned the roof. To this post a figure was tied, so swathed and muffled in the sheets which had been used to secure it, that one could not for the moment tell whether it was a man or a woman. One towel passed around the throat and was secured at the back of the pillar, and another covered the lower part of the face, and over it 2 dark eyes full of grief and shame and a dreadful questioning, stared back at us. In a moment, we had torn off the gag, unswathed the bonds, and Mrs. Stapleton sank to the floor in front of us. As her beautiful head fell upon her chest, I saw the clear red wheal of a whiplash across her neck.
What the?
This guy's the worst.
Okay, maybe a divorce is in order and Sir Henry can have
This
his
guy-
previously married.
This guy, I hate him so much.
Yeah, what the?
He abuses dogs and puppies and manipulates other people. I just hate him so much. "The brute!" cried Holmes. "Here, Lestrade, your brandy bottle." He's just like, "Give me your alcohol." And he goes, "Put her in the chair. She was faint from ill usage and exhaustion."
Yeah, maybe she doesn't need alcohol.
Maybe not. British. She opened her eyes again. "Is he safe?" she asked. "Has he escaped?" "He cannot escape us, madam." No, I did not mean my husband. Sir Henry, is he safe?" "Yes." "And the hound?" "It is dead." She gave a long sigh of satisfaction. Thank God. Oh, this villain. See how he has treated me." She shot her arms out from her sleeves, and we saw with horror that they were mottled with bruises. "But this is nothing. It is my mind and soul that he has tortured and defiled. I could endure it all, ill usage, solitude, a life of deception, everything, as long as I could still cling to the hope that I had his love. But now I know that in this also I have been duped and his tool." She broke into passionate sobbing as she spoke. "You bear him no goodwill, madam," said Holmes. "Tell us then where we shall find him. If you have ever aided him in evil, help us now and so atone." "There is but one place where he could have fled," she answered. "There is an old tin mine on the island in the heart of the mire. It was there that he kept his hound, and there also where he made preparations so that he might take refuge. That is where he would fly. The fog bank lay like a white wool upon the window, and Holmes held the lamp towards it. "See," said he, "no one could find his way into the Grimpen Mire tonight." She laughed and clapped her hands, her eyes and tears gleamed with fierce merriment. "He may find his way in, but never out," she cried. "How can he see the guiding wands tonight? We planted them together, he and I, to mark the pathway through the mire. Oh, if I could have only plucked them out today, then indeed you would have him at your mercy." It was evident to us that all pursuit of him was in vain until the fog had lifted. Meanwhile, we left Lestrade in possession of the house while Holmes and I went back with the baronet to Baskerville Hall. The story of the Stapletons could no longer be withheld from him, but he took the blow barely when he had learned the truth about the woman with whom he had loved. So he's in love with the sister/wife.
Mm-hmm.
So he's just like, poor guy.
Yeah.
But the shock of the night's adventures had shattered his nerves, and before morning he lay delirious in a high fever under the care of Dr. Mortimer, which is fair. You also left him outside in the dark, in a cloud, because that's what fog is, wet, and, like alone and no blanket. Blankets. See,
Like
this is
after
why...
getting attacked by a dog.
This is why we should wear blankets at all time. I'm just saying. It's just general life preservation.
Yeah.
Blankets. The two of them were destined to travel. So, Sir Henry and Dr. Mortimer. The two of them were destined to travel together round the world before Sir Henry had become once more the hale, hearty man that he had been before. He became the master of this ill-omened estate. So he was, I don't know, that's worded weird. Anyway, moving on, I'm not worried about it. And now I come rapidly to the conclusion of this singular narrative in which I have tried to make the reader share those dark fears and vague surmises which clouded our lives so long and ended in so tragic a matter. In the morning after the death of the Hound, the fog had lifted and we were guided by Mrs. Stapleton to the point where they had found a pathway through the bog. It helped us to realize the horror of this woman's life when we saw the eagerness and joy in which she laid us on her husband's tracks. We left her standing upon a thin peninsula of the firm, peaty soil, which tapered out into the widespread bog, and from the end of it, a small wand planted here and there showed the path zigzagging from the tuft to tuft of rushes among the green-scummed pits and foul quagmires which bared the way to the stranger. Rank weeds and lush, slimy water plants sent an odor of decay and heavy miasmic vapor into our faces. Ooh, miasmic vapors. That's a fun phrase. And while a false step plunged us more than once into thigh-deep into the quick, dark, quavering moor, which shook for yards in soft undulations around our feet. Its tenacious grips plucked at our heels as we walked, and when we sank into it, it was as if some malignant hand was tugging us down into those obscene depths. So grim and purposeful was the clutch in which it held us. Once we only saw a trace of someone had passed this perilous way before us. From amid a tuft of cotton grass, which bore upon it the slime of some dark thing, was projecting. Holmes sank to his waist as he stepped from the path to seize it, and had we not been there to drag him out, he could never have set his foot upon firm land again. He held an old black boot in the air. Myers, Toronto, was printed on the leather inside. "It is worth a mud bath," said he. "It is our friend Sir Henry's missing boot." Well, Sherlock was right. He would get his boot back. That was like chapter 3. Yeah, there was a lot of real good words in that one. Yeah, this guy knows how to pick words to describe things very exactly. All right, so this is our friend Sir Henry's missing boot. Thrown here by Stapleton in his flight. Exactly. He retained it in his hand after using it to set the Hound upon the track. He fled when he knew the game was up, still clutching it, and he hurled it away at this point of his flight. We know at last that he came so far in safety. But more than that, we were never destined to know. Though there was much which we might surmise. There was no chance of finding footsteps in the mire, for the rising mud oozed swiftly in upon them, and as we at last reached firmer ground beyond the morass, we all looked eagerly for them. But no slightest sign of them ever met our eyes. If the earth told the true story, then Stapleton never reached that island of refuge towards which he struggled through the fog upon the last night. Somewhere in the heart of the great Grimpen mire, down in the foul slime of the huge morass which had sucked him in, this cold and cruel-hearted man is forever buried. Many traces we found of him in the bog-girt island, where he had hid his savage ally. A huge driving wheel and a shaft half filled with rubbish showed the position of an abandoned mine. Besides it were the crumbling remains of the cottage of the miners, driven away, no doubt, by the foul reek of the surrounding swamp. In one of these, a staple and chain with a quality of gnawed bones showed where the animal had been confined. A skeleton with a tangle of brown hair adhering to it lay among the debris. "A dog," said Holmes. "By Jove, a curly-haired spaniel." So Dr. Mortimer had a curly-haired spaniel dog who went missing, and apparently it was eaten by the Hound. That's sad. So the skeleton it's the skeleton of this dog. "So a dog," said Holmes. "By Jove, a curly-haired spaniel. Poor Mortimer will never see his pet again. Well, I do not know that this place contains any secrets which we have not already fathomed. He could hide his hound, but he could not hush its voice, and hence came those cries, which even in daylight were not pleasant to hear. On an emergency, he could keep the hound in the outhouse at Merripit, but it was always a risk, and it would only be the supreme day, which he regarded as the end of all of his efforts, that he dared to do it. This paste in the tin is no doubt the luminous mixture with which the creature was daubed. It was suggested, of course, by the story of the family hellhound, and by the desire to frighten old Sir Charles to death. No wonder the poor devil of a convict ran and screamed, even as our friend did, and as we ourselves might have done when he saw such a creature bounding across the darkness of the moor upon his track. It was a cunning device, for, apart from the chance of driving your victim to his death, what peasant would venture to inquire so closely into such a creature, should he get sight of it? And many have done upon the moor. I said it in London, Watson, and I say it again now, that never have we helped to hunt down a more dangerous man than he who is lying yonder. He swept his long arm across the huge mottled expanse of the green-splotched bog, which stretched away until it merged into the russet slopes of the moor. Chapter 15. So, supposedly, he's dead. But I say no body, no death.
They said they saw parts of him, though.
Well, they found a boot. They found Sir Henry's boot.
Yeah.
And then they found, like, the skeleton of, like, the
Dog.
little puppy.
So they didn't
Which
mean
is-
actual body parts. They found, like, evidence, like, oh, maybe he was around here because of these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess, like, probably the way that things, like, lined up, it was very foggy, and they're going with the, like, man has sunk into the moor and has died. Which, fair.
Would be convenient, but...
It would be convenient, but, I mean, all right, for case of story, man is dead. For case of my suspiciousness, gotta double tap. All right, chapter 15. This is our last chapter, and we are getting through it. We must. Chapter 15, Retrospection. It was the end of November. Holmes and I sat upon a raw, foggy night on either side of a blazing fire in our sitting room at Baker Street. Since the tragic upshot of our visit of Devonshire, we had been engaged in two affairs of the utmost importance. In the first of which he had exposed the atrocious conduct of Colonel Upwood in connection with the famous card scandal of the Nonpareil Club, while in the second he had defended the unfortunate Mademoiselle Montpensier, it's French, anyway, from the charge of murder which hung over her in connection with the death of her stepdaughter. Another French name, anyway. The young lady who, as it will be remembered, was found 6 months later alive and married in New York. Every time. Fake your death, go get married in New York. Anyway, my friend was in excellent spirits over the success which had attended a succession of difficult and important cases, so that I was able to induce him to discuss the details of the Baskerville mystery. I had waited patiently for the opportunity, for I was aware that he would never permit cases to overlap, and that his clear and logical mind would not be drawn from its present work to dwell upon memories of the past. Sir Henry and Dr. Mortimer were, however, in London and on their way to that long voyage which had been recommended for the restoration of his shattered nerves. So they're going to travel around the world. They had called upon us that very afternoon, so it was natural that the subject should come up for discussion. The whole course of events, said Holmes, from the point of view of the man who called himself Stapleton, was simple and direct, although to us, who had no means in the beginning of knowing the motives of his actions, could only learn parts of the facts. It all appeared exceedingly complex. I have had the advantage of 2 conversations with Mrs. Stapleton, and the case has now been so entirely cleared up that I am now not aware that there is anything which has remained a secret to us. You will find a few notes upon the matter under the heading of B in my indexed list of cases. Well, perhaps you would kindly give me a sketch of the course of the events from memory? Yeah. Certainly. Though I cannot guarantee that I will carry all the facts in my mind. Really, Sherlock? Okay, fine. Intense mental concentration has a curious way of blotting out what has passed, and the barrister who had... Nope. That was a little notification that I need to restart Chrome. Anyway. The barrister who has his case at the finger's end and is able to argue that the expert upon his own subject finds that a week or 2 of the courts will drive it all out of his head once more. So each of my cases displaces the last. And then there's a bunch of French names that I'm just going to skip right over. So far as the case of the Hound goes, however, I will give you the course of events as nearly as I can, and you will suggest anything that I may have forgotten. My inquiries show beyond all question that the family portrait did not lie, and that this fellow was indeed a Baskerville. He was the son of that Roger Baskerville, the younger brother of Sir Charles, who fled with a sinister reputation to South America, where he had said to have died unmarried. He did, as a matter of fact, marry, and had 1 child, this fellow, whose real name is the same as his father's, so Sir Roger Baskerville Jr. Yeah. He married, you're gonna love this.
Who married?
Roger? No, so
Junior.
Stapleton.
Okay.
Yeah. So, he married Beryl Garcia. She has a name. She has 2 names. A first and a last name. Good job, Beryl. So he married Beryl Garcia, one of the beauties of Costa Rica, and having purloined a considerable sum of public money, he changed his name to Vandeleur and fled to England, where he established a school in the east of Yorkshire. His reason for attempting this special line of business was that he had struck up an acquaintance with a consumptive tutor upon the voyage home, and that he had used this man's ability to make the undertaking a success. Fraser, a tutor, died, however, and the school, which had begun well, sank from disrepute into infamy. The Vandeleurs found it convenient to change their name to Stapleton, and he brought the remains of his fortune, his schemes for the future, and his taste for entomology to the south of England. I learned at the British Museum that he was a recognized authority upon the subject, and that the name of Vandeleur had been permanently attached to a certain moth which he had, in his Yorkshire days, been the first to describe. We now come to the portion of his life which has proved to be such intense interest to us. The fellow had evidently made inquiry and found that the only 2 lives intervened between him and a valuable estate. When he went to Devonshire, his plans were, I believe, exceedingly hazy, but that he meant mischief from the first it is evident from the way in which he took his wife with him in the character of his sister. The idea of using her as a decoy was certainly already in his mind, though he may not have been certain how the details of his plot were to be arranged. He meant in the end to have the estate, because nobody would be suspicious. What? Anyway, and he was ready to use any tool or run any risk for that end. His first act was to establish himself as near to his ancestral home as he could, and his second was to cultivate a friendship with Sir Charles Baskerville and the neighbors. The baronet himself told him about the family hound, and so prepared the way for his own death. Stapleton, as I will continue to call him, knew that the old man's heart was weak and that a shock would kill him, so much that he learned from Dr. Mortimer. He had heard also that Sir Charles was superstitious and had taken into the grim legend very seriously. His ingenious mind instantly suggested a way in which the baronet could be done to death, and yet it would still hardly be possible to bring home the guilt to the real murderer. Having conceived the idea that he would probably carry it out with considerable finesse, an ordinary schemer would have been content to work with a savage hound. The use of artificial means to make this creature diabolical was a flash of genius on his part. The dog he bought in London from Ross and Mangles, the dealers in Fulham Road. It was the strongest and most savage in their possession, and he brought it down from the North Devon line and walked a great distance over the moor so as to get it home without exciting any remarks. He had already, on his insect hunts, learned to penetrate the Grimpen mire, and so had found a safe hiding place for the creature. Here he kennelled it and waited for his chance. But it was some time coming. The old gentleman would not be decoyed outside of his grounds at night. Several times Stapleton lurked about with his hound, but without avail. It was during these fruitless quests that he, or rather his ally, was seen by peasants, and that the legend of the demon dog received a new confirmation. He had hoped that his wife might lure Sir Charles to his ruin, but here she proved unexpectedly independent. She would not endeavor to entangle the old gentleman in a sentimental attachment which might deliver him over his enemy. Threats and even, I am sorry to say, blows refused to move her. She would have nothing to do with it, and for a time Stapleton was at a deadlock. He found a way out of his difficulties through the chance that Sir Charles, who had conceived a friendship for him, made him the minister of his charity in the case of this unfortunate woman, Mrs. Laura Lyons. By representing himself as a single man, he acquired complete influence over her, and he gave her to understand, in the event of her obtaining a divorce from her husband, he would marry her. His plans were suddenly brought to a head by his knowledge that Sir Charles was about to leave the Hall on the advice of Dr. Mortimer, with whose opinion he himself pretended to coincide. He must act at once, for his victim would get beyond his power. He therefore put pressure upon Mrs. Lyons to write the letter, imploring the old man to give her an interview that evening before his departure for London. He then, by an argument, prevented her from going, and so had the chance for which he had waited. Driving back in the evening from Combe Tracy, he was in time to get his hound and to treat it with the infernal paint, and to bring the beast round to the gate in which he had reason to expect that the old man would be waiting. The dog, incited by his master, sprang upon the wicket gate and pursued the unfortunate baronet, who fled screaming down the yew alley. In that gloomy tunnel, it must indeed have been a dreadful sight to see the huge black creature with its flaming jaws and blazing eyes bounding after its victim. He fell dead at the end of the alley from heart disease and terror. Poor guy.
Yeah.
Like, what a horrible way to go. Like, he did not deserve this. The hound had kept upon the grassy border while the baronet had run down the path, and so that no track but the man's was visible. On seeing him lying still, the creature had probably approached to sniff him, but finding him dead, turned away again. It was then that it left the print which had been observed by Dr. Mortimer. The hound was called off and hurried away to its lair in the Grimpen Mire. A mystery was left which puzzled the authorities, alarmed the countryside, and finally brought the case within the scope of our observation. How many more words? So many words, but we're doing it.
We're almost
Getting there. There's like 3.5 pages left, but it's like it's a textbook. Yeah, it's okay. All right. So much. Well, it's the finale. I think we're allowed to be a little bit long on that. Yeah. So much for the death of Sir Charles Baskerville. You perceive the devilish cunning of it, for it really would have been almost impossible to make a case against the real murderer. His only accomplice was one who could never give him away, and the grotesque, inconceivable nature of the device only served to make it more effective. Both of the women concerned in the case, Mrs. Stapleton and Mrs. Laura Lyons, were left with strong suspicion against Stapleton. Mrs. Stapleton knew that he had designs upon the old man, and also of the existence of the hound. Mrs. Lyons knew neither of these things, but had been impressed by the death occurred at the time of the uncancelled appointment, which was only known to him. However, both of them were under his influence, and he had nothing to fear from them. The first half of his task was successfully accomplished, but the more difficult still remained. It is possible that Stapleton did not know of the existence of an heir in Canada. In any case, how did he expect the heir, the inheritance to go to him? I don't know. Yeah, he's just no one knows that we're related. Clearly, it'll come to me.
My name several times.
give me a month, I'll be back to being a Baskerville. Anyway, it is possible that he did not know about an existence of an heir in Canada. In any case, he would very soon learn it from his friend Dr. Mortimer, and he was told by the letter all the details upon the arrival of Henry Baskerville. Stapleton's first idea was that the young stranger from Canada might possibly be done to death in London without coming to Devonshire at all. He distrusted his wife ever since she had refused to help him in laying the trap for the old man, and he dared not leave her long out of his sight for fear that he would lose influence over her. It was for this reason that he took her to London with him. They lodged, I find, at the Mexborough Private Hotel in Craven Street, which was actually one of those called upon by my agent in search for evidence. Here, he kept his wife imprisoned in the room, while he, disguised in a beard, followed Dr. Mortimer to Baker Street, and afterwards to the station and to Northumberland Hotel. His wife had some inkling to his plans, but she had such a fear of her husband, a fear founded upon brutal ill treatment, that she dared not write to warn the man whom she knew to be in danger. If the letter should fall into Stapleton's hands, her own life would not be safe. Eventually, as we know, she adopted the expedient of cutting out the words which would form the message, and later addressing the letter in a disguised hand. It reached the baronet and gave him the first warning of his danger. It was very essential for Stapleton to get some article of Sir Henry's attire, so that, in case he was driven to use the dog, he might always have the means of setting him upon his track. With the characteristic promptness and audacity, he set about this at once, and we cannot doubt that the boots or the chambermaid of the hotel were well bribed to help him in his design. By chance, however, the first boot which was procured for him was a new one, and therefore useless in his purpose. He then had it returned and obtained another, a most instructive incident which it proved... Let's put my thumb on the other side of that line. A most instructive incident, which it proved conclusively in my mind that we were dealing with a real hound, as no other supposition could explain this anxiety to obtain an old boot in the indifference of a new one. The more outre and grotesque an incident is, the more carefully it deserves to be examined, and the very point which appears to complicate a case is this: when duly considered and scientifically handled, the one which is most likely to elucidate it. I used a lot of fancy words there to say I figured it out. That's what he just did. And I stumbled over 90% of them. Anyway. Then we had the visit from our friends next morning, shadowed always by the Stapleton in the cab. From his knowledge of our rooms and of my appearance, as well as from his general conduct, I am inclined to think that Stapleton's career of crime had been by no means limited to this single Baskerville affair. It is suggestive that during the last 3 years there have been 4 considerable burglaries in the West County, for none of which was any criminal ever arrested. The last of these, at Folkestone Court in May, was remarkable for the cold-blooded pistoling of the page. That's sad. Don't kill some. No. Who surprised the masked and solitary burglar. I cannot doubt that Stapleton recruited his waning resources in this fashion, and that for years he has been a desperate and dangerous man. We had an example of his readiness of resource that morning when he had got away from us so successfully, and also of his audacity in sending back my own name to me through the cabman. From that moment, I forgot about that. So he realized that somebody was chasing them. So Sherlock tracked down the cab driver and was like, "Who was that?" And the cab driver was like, "Oh, that was Sherlock Holmes." And Sherlock's like, "Oh." From that moment, he understood that I had taken over the case in London, and that therefore there was no chance of him there. He returned to Dartmoor and awaited the arrival of the baronet. "One moment," said I. This is John. "I have no doubt described the sequence of events correctly, but there is one point which you have left unexplained. What became of the Hound when its master was in London?" Sherlock again. "I have given some attention to this matter, and it is undoubtedly of importance. There can be no question that Stapleton had a confidant, though it is unlikely that he ever placed himself in his power by sharing all of his plans with him. There is an old manservant at Merripit House whose name was Anthony. His connection with the Stapletons can be traced for several years, as far back as the schoolmastering days, so that he must have been aware that his master and mistress were really husband and wife. This man had disappeared and escaped from the country. It is suggestive that Anthony is not a common name in England, while Antonio is so in all the Spanish and Spanish-American countries." As we're all over here going oh. The man, like Mrs. Stapleton herself, spoke good English, but with a curious lisping accent. I have myself seen this old man across the Grimpen Mire by the path which Stapleton had marked out. It is very probable, therefore, in the absence of its master, that he is the one who cared for the Hound. The Stapletons went down to Devonshire, whither they soon followed by Sir Henry and you. One word now is how I stood myself at that time. I may possibly recur to your memory that which I examined the paper upon which the printed words were fastened. I made a close inspection of the watermark. In doing so, I held it within a few inches of my eyes, and was conscious of a faint smell of a scent known as white jessamine. Jessamine? There are 75 perfumes, which it is very necessary that a criminal expert should be able to distinguish from each other, and cases have more than once, within my own experience, depended upon their prompt recognition. The scent suggested the presence of a lady, and already my thoughts began to turn towards the Stapletons. Thus I had made certain of the Hound, and was guessed at the criminal before we ever went to the West Country. Well, fine. You knew it before it even happened.
Yeah.
Good for you,
At what point is Watson gonna be like, and then you just sent me there by myself?
Yeah. 120 pages in, and he's like, "I always knew." Thanks, buddy. Love this guy. Anyway, it was my game to watch Stapleton. Oh, it was his game to watch Stapleton. It was evident, however, that I could not do this if I were with you, since he would be keenly on his guard. I deceived everyone, therefore, yourself included, and I came down secretly when I was supposed to be in London. My hardships were not as great as you imagined. For a second, I'm like, oh no, there's more. It's like, it is the end of the book. We're almost there. Okay. So my struggles were not as much as you imagined, though such trifling details must never interfere with the investigation of a case. I stayed for the most part at Combe Tracy, and only used the hut upon the moor when it was necessary to be near the scene of action. Cartwright had come down with me, and in his disguise as a country boy, he was of great assistance to me. I was dependent on him for food and clean linen, and when I was watching Stapleton, Cartwright was frequently found watching you, and so that I was able to keep my hand upon all of the strings. I have already told you that your reports reached me rapidly, being forwarded instantly from Baker Street to Combe Tracy. They were of great service to me, and especially that one incidentally truthful piece of biography of Stapleton's. I was able to establish the identity of the man and the woman, and knew at last exactly how I stood. The case had been considerably complicated through the incident and the escaped convict and the relations between him and the Barrymores. This also you cleared up in a very efficient way, though I had already come to the same conclusions of my own observations. Good job you did it, I already knew. By this time, you discovered me upon the moor, and I had a complete knowledge of the whole business, but I had not a case which could go to jury. Even Stapleton's attempt upon Sir Henry that night, which ended in the death of the unfortunate convict, could not help us much in proving murder against our man. There seemed to be no alternative but to catch him red-handed, and so we had to use Sir Henry, alone and apparently unprotected, as bait. We did so, and at the cost of a severe shock to our client, he succeeded in completing our case and driving Stapleton to his destruction. That Sir Henry should have been exposed Sir Henry should have been exposed, this is, I must confess, a reproach of my management of the case. But he had no means of foreseeing the terrible and paralyzing spectacle which the beast presented, nor could we predict the fog which enabled him to burst upon us in short notice. We succeeded in our object as a cost which both the specialist and Dr. Mortimer assure me will be a temporary one. A long journey may enable our friend to recover not only from his shattered nerves, but also from his wounded feelings. His love for the lady was deep and sincere, and to him the saddest part of this black business is that he should have been deceived by her. That's the saddest part?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but she didn't actually, she lied to me? And it's like, sir, you almost died. Like, someone was actively hunting you. Okay. It only remains to indicate the part which she had played throughout. There can be no doubt that the Stapletons exercised an influence over her, which may have been love or may have been fear, or very possibly both, since there are by no means incompatible emotions. It was, at least, absolutely effective. At his command, she consented to pass as his sister, though he found the limits of his power over her when he endeavored to make her the direct accessory to murder. She was ready to warn Sir Henry so far as she could without implicating her husband, and again she tried to do so. Stapleton himself seemed to have been capable of jealousy, and when he saw the baronet playing court to the lady, even though it was part of his own plan, still he could not help interrupting with a passionate outburst which revealed the fiery soul which his self-contained manner so clearly and cleverly concealed. By encouraging the intimacy, he made it certain that Sir Henry would frequently come over to Merripit House, and that he would sooner or later get the opportunity which he desired. On the day of the crisis, however, his wife turned suddenly against him, and she learned something of the death of the convict. And she knew that the Hound was being kept in the outhouse on the evening that Sir Henry was coming to dinner. She taxed her husband with his intending crime, and a furious scene followed in which he showed her for the first time that she had a rival in his love. Her fidelity turned in an instant to bitter hatred, and he saw that she would betray him. He tied her up, therefore, and she might have no chance of warning Sir Henry, and he hoped, no doubt, that when the whole countryside put down the baronet's death to the curse of the family, as they certainly would do, he would win his wife back in an accomplished fact, and to keep silent upon what she had known. In this, I fancy that in any case he had made a miscalculation, and that, if we had not been there, his doom would nonetheless have been sealed. A woman of Spanish blood does not condone any such injury so lightly. And now, my dear Watson, without referring to my notes, I cannot give you a more detailed account of this curious case. I do not know that anything essential has been left unexplained. Well, he could not hope to frighten Sir Henry to death as he had done the old uncle with his boogie hound. The beast was savage and half-starved. If its appearance did not frighten the victim to death, at least it would paralyze the resistance which had offered. Oh, no doubt. There only remains one difficulty. If Stapleton came into succession, how could he explain the fact that he, the heir, had been living unannounced under another name, so close to the property? How could he claim it without any suspicion or inquiry? It is a formidable difficulty, and I fear that you ask too much when you explain me to solve it. He's just like, I don't want to bother with that.
Sherlock.
Oh, Sherlock. The past and the present are within the field of my inquiry, but what a man may do in the future is a hard question to answer. Mrs. Stapleton had heard her husband discuss the problem on several occasions. There were 3 possible courses. He might claim the property from South America, establish his identity before the British authorities there, and obtain the fortune without ever coming to England at all. Or he might adopt an elaborate disguise during the short time that he needed to be in London. Or he might furnish an accomplice with the proofs and the papers putting him in as heir, and retaining a claim upon some proportion of his income. We cannot doubt, from what we know of him, that he would have found some way out of the difficulty. And now, my dear Watson, we have had some weeks of severe work, and for one evening, I think, we may turn our thoughts to more pleasant channels. I have, insert name of French cigar that I can't pronounce, and have you heard of, insert next name of French cigar that I can't pronounce. Might I trouble you then to be ready in a half hour, and we can stop at Marcini's for a little dinner on the way? And that is the end. We have reached it. Do 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 do. Yay! Not bad. Only about 15 minutes over. All right. Thus is the end. All right. Takeaways. What you thinkins?
I'm still a little salty at Sherlock, but
I'm calling out Matt.
Salty. Like, I mean, Sherlock Holmes, come on.
Stapleton's the worst.
Stapleton's the worst.
Yeah.
He's the worst.
Sherlock, I still am annoyed by.
I'm hashtag Team Watson all the way.
Hashtag Team Watson. What were we saying that our t-shirt should be? Like hashtag Team Watson.
Oh, and then like chapter 13, oh my gosh, or something.
Yeah, like oh my gosh, chapter 12. It was chapter 12.
Chapter 12.
Yeah, that was a wild one. If you want a wild series
Take a
of
look
events.
Back, you get to see a lot of fun reactions from me because I was live reacting.
It was the first time that we had like an actual info dump on like revealing things, so that was very fun. So thank you for joining us in our reading of The Hound of the Baskervilles. Finally, we can pick now a book that has a better cover than this. As for what we're going to be doing next, not too sure just yet. Book Buffet, as it stands, is not going away. We are taking a 2-week break. Just so you know, next week, a whole bunch of us are going to a big library conference, and we are going to be learning some stuff. So it's a great opportunity for us to be able to do that, and then I'm taking the following week off after that. So we'll be off for 2 weeks, and then when we come back, it's right around the spooky season, so I plan to read a short story, spookifying one, that Thursday, and then the next day is our Let's Play Something Spooky, which I'll reveal. Well, yeah, I'll tell you what that one's going to be next time.
Oh,
I'm trying to convince them to play one game,
yeah,
but I'm not sure that I'll be.
Me and Rachel get scared easily. So.
Yeah.
Me too, but I handle it better when others are being tortured. So we're really excited about it, like in the like dreading kind of excited kind of way. Whoops, that was me. So we have that coming up, and also Matt, you've got a upcoming program. So tell us about that.
In December, I'm going to be on Twitch teaching all resume basics at 7 p.m. on December 19th, which is a Thursday.
Nice.
So we'll talk about resumes and your job search process and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and that's not even out in our newsletter just yet. So you just got a sneak peek.
You got a sneak peek.
A sneak peek. All right. Well, I think we're good to go, and we need to set up this room for something else. So Have a good one. We'll see you next time in 2-ish weeks. All right. See you later. Bye.
Bye.